Hi, Dan Paulson here, and welcome to this video where I'm going to be taking the Enuma Elish, Tablet 1, the Babylonian creation story, and begin to play it out in the psyche and show what I am doing and learning how to decode the nested template from inside of there. As I interpret, you will notice there is a conspicuous absence of anything supernatural. It will appear as something that is psychological and something that we can mentally interact with. And again, even though it's theoretical, it is demonstrable. There are visible, viewable, mentally recognizable steps that we take for self-healing that when a person is on the path, they cannot deny those steps. So this becomes a demonstrable process at this level. All right, to get underway, because this is going to be big, I'm going to post a link below to the video, the introduction, that how this is going to start. I need to jump into it, but I'm going to let you know that the way it's going to emerge is that every bit of this story plays out in the psyche. This does not happen in the world. It happens in the mental world. Everything in the story mirrors something inside of the psyche. So let's get started on it. This is the Enuma Elish. It is the world's oldest creation myth. I'm also going to post a link below to a reading that I did on the Enuma Elish, where I've got the tablets all identified in chapters. So you can go there and listen to it. You can also Google it online and read it, or you can read along with what I have here if your device is big enough to show the words. The first thing I want to do is, there's something that I understand where they've gotten to. That there is a healing process that we're on, that there is a journey where I am turning inward and I'm using parts of me to interact with other parts of me. And I've learned that well enough to realize that these stories are going to contain elements in there where that becomes very evident. And I want to find those parts. And what I'm going to do is use those parts to tie the story to my life. That is where I'm going to link myself to the template of the story. This one is going to get a little bit more deep, but in all of my previous work, I've done a lot of Buddha, Lao Tzu, and Jesus comparisons where the verses are being played out in the psyche in the same mirror image manner as here, except that they lack this layering density to create the story as a huge thing. So if this is really unfamiliar to you but interesting to you, find some of those videos that I have in playlist with Jesus, Buddha, and Lao Tzu comparisons. Because even if it sounds weird right now, I can assure you that those are just simple versions of what these larger teachings are. Even though they all sound a lot different from each other. Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu taught the same thing, and this is going to be the same thing as well. Yay. All right, let's open this up and get right into it. And even though I have this fairly well defined, I am going to treat it as if I don't, just so I can exercise the thought process that I use. I'm going to read and look at a few things here. At a time when even the glories above had yet to be named, and unuttered was the word for the world which lay beneath, it was then that the first being Apsu, who was their source, and the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all, intermingled their waters, producing neither field nor marsh. And there's something in there I see, though, that is Apsu and a progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all. I want to identify what those two are, and I'm going to kind of just do that for now and move on. Apsu, first male, Tiamat, progenitor, the origin of all. What I'm going to start looking for is commonalities and a structure in these names. Right now what we have is Apsu and Tiamat. When they intermingled their waters, they gave birth to neither field nor marsh. Ah, interesting. So right now I'm going to leave the Apsu and Tiamat identified there. Those are a couple of component parts, right? A couple of people in there. Some actual, some functioning humans or gods or something. I'm going to leave the intermingled waters there at a time when no divine beings. Okay, so we have divine beings that have come into play now, but none have come into existence, which is interesting. There are no names to be spoken, no fates pronounced. We'll let that go for now. But the gods were given at birth. So there's gods were given birth within those intermixing ways. What the heck? That's crazy. The first were Lamu and Lahamu. So there we have a couple of interesting things. We got a first man and a first woman and a couple of gods that were, it has hints of Genesis, if you look at man and woman first and then giving birth to Cain and Abel, the component parts are there, but the what they're doing is different. The parts are still there. What they're doing is different. And of course, there's some additional parts as well. So we've got the Genesis components plus additional. Yeah, fun. So let's keep identifying the people that are in here, knowing that somehow those have to fit into who and what we are. We're looking for a tie point that really solidly we can say, boom, I know exactly what that is. Right now, I can't say what Apsu is or Tiamat is, what those gods are, or what Lamu and Lahamu is. So I can't really attach to this story and play it out inside of me yet. However, what I'm going to do to help me is to start pulling the names out. I'm going to make a list here of the names. And here's something that to watch for. This is where some of the multi-layering of the teaching comes into play. If I write down the names, first being Apsu and then Tiamat, Lamu and Lahamu, if we write those down and identify them, we will also find out that not only are those names there, but it's also male, then female, male, then female. That is a structure that is being kept here. Does that sound familiar? Garden of Eden, Adam, then Eve. We have the idea in here that the conscious is in charge of the decisions that go into the subconscious, into the female, which creates the offspring that then act out in its simplest form. That's a hierarchy, a mental hierarchy. The conscious is in charge of the subconscious. It's never the other way around, and they're using the conscious as the male and the subconscious as the female. In modernity, we might look at things like that and go, boy, why are they so tough on women? Let's change that up a little bit, and that'll drop the nested teaching. Yeah, my wife and I live equally. There's times one or the other is in charge depending on our skill sets and what's going on, but we're a team, we're a unit, we know how to work together, so we don't have that hierarchy thing going on. But it doesn't offend me because I realize what they're doing in their time is they are using that as a hierarchy to be in here, so we can't politen things up with interpretations that put the Tiamat first, maybe an Apsu or something like that. So listing these actually is how you start seeing those layers come in, pulling them out of there and putting them in order, and you look and you begin to realize there's other patterns that are emerging in here as well. So always keep an eye on multiple layers. It's not just the verse itself. There's layers of teaching within the verse that are hidden in there. And actually, you don't have to write them down. You can just be aware of them. I'm doing it here for just example illustration purposes here. Okay, let's move on to the rest of page 1 then. The first were Lamu and Lahamu, like we just talked about. Their names were spoken. But here's the fun part. But once they had fully grown and become mature of form, then were born Anshar and Kishar, and they outshone them. So it sounds like Lamu and Lahamu had offspring. And the way that this is described, if you were to go look it up in the encyclopedia, is that this is the third generation of gods that were at that point in time. I'm going to stay careful, though. I don't want to describe what they're doing. I want to describe what I'm doing. So what we have here is a conscious and a subconscious. And then at various points in time, at first we're really just little kids and we're kind of combined. Everything is okay. But as we grow and as we learn, we start taking on other personality traits. We become something different. These are analogs demonstrating how we are becoming different people, but there's still an original there. So let's take a second, bounce back, and look at this again. Here we have male starting, female second, Apsu and Tiamat, the origin, begets Lamu and Lahamu, who begets Anshar and Kishar. And remember something else. Remember right in the beginning it said, at a time when no divine beings had yet come into existence. Now that could be something that maybe the gods that's just preceding that first Lama and Lahamu, it might be just sequencing in there that nothing was there. But I believe it has a purpose. And it's an important purpose, actually. It's incredibly important. Divine beings are not the same as gods. That sounds funny to us. But they're using different things here. And we need to make sure that we maintain separation in the identity of what they're doing. We can't take our knowledge and our culture and go to their time. We have to spot these differences and think that, okay, there's no divine beings, yet somehow Apsu and Tiamat, which are the origin, they didn't even call them gods, started creating gods off of them. So that's what is actually here, regardless of what you read somewhere else. These are deciphered in the world as layers of gods, where I think to myself, that first layer is not gods. That was originators. There's something different. The gods mean something different. They're analogs for something different. And we have to unwrap our committed thinking from what a god is, from our Western belief. And in this case, the god is going to be an analog for something different. So we're going to maintain the separation between gods and divine beings. Divine beings are still not being created as I read this, even though gods are. Data point. We'll get back to it if need be. Backing up a few lines here, the first were Lamu and Lahamu. Their names were spoken. But once they had fully grown and become mature of form, then were born Anshar and Kishar, and they outshone them. And so many days passed by, and many years were counted. Their first son was Anu, being as great as any of his forebears, and Anshar caused his son Anu to be just like himself. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a second. We've got the lineage happening right here in a very small scale. First of all, we had the gods creating gods after the original source, and then after so many days and many years were counted, they have an offspring, Anu, being as great as any of his forebears. So whatever Anu is as powerful and as great as anybody that's come before him. But wait, remember back here? Then were born Anshar and Kishar, and they outshone them. So here we actually have, we see that there was a step in the past where the origination created Lamu and Lahamu, and then Anshar and Kishar, who came from them, outshone them. So later on, as this is happening, we see Nudimmud proved to be even greater than his forebears, profoundly wise and full of insight, with strength in his limbs, more infused with might than even his grandfather Anshar. So, he is more powerful, more wise, and full of insight than Anshar. But remember, Anshar is not the original god, the male. Lamu was the original male god. Anshar was an offspring, but Anshar outshone Lamu and Lahamu. We're just building these up. We're building them up. And remembering, we're trying to find a tie-in point where this works in our psyche. How does this fit? That's what the goal is. All right, let's keep looking at more text here. We're going to back up and string the last bit here into the next page. Nudimmud proved to be even greater than his forebears, profoundly wise and full of insight, with strength in his limbs, more infused with might than even his grandfather Anshar. So he's big bad guy, with none among the gods who could be considered his equal. That generation of gods would gather together for wild revels, so they proved bothersome to Tiamat. Their hullabaloo echoed. All this commotion proved unsettling to Tiamat's inner being, and she was bothered by all of their activity within Andaruna. And okay, before moving on, I want to identify what that Andaruna is for myself. So it is the dwelling place of the gods. Good to know. There was nothing Apsu could do to mitigate their carousing, but there was nothing Tiamat would say to quiet them down. And no matter how troublesome their conduct became to her, regardless of how rowdy things were, she just put up with it. Okay, personally, I can tie in really tight to this point right here. I'm not sure how much to keep gradually revealing or just throw some stuff out to unmuddy the waters. And I think that maybe that would be helpful right now, because there's some things that if they were understood, they'll be better. It'll be better to go with the flow on this. As we go through, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. As we go through, we're going to find out that these gods have to be destroyed, and they're going to be replaced by men. Men are going to be created. Humans are going to be created. to replace the gods. Here's what the gods are, and this is what is happening, that Tiamat is our subconscious. This is what is storing all of the things inside of us, and it's growing big and strong. It's the biggest and strongest god. It represents our earliest self when we are in charge. Whatever our desires, our fears, all of those things are in charge. And the reason they're called gods, but they're called what? They're not good gods. They need to be destroyed. They're bad gods. But they're called gods because they have control over you. And apparently that's just in their culture. In other places you go, and what do you have that act out are demons, things that still have power over you that you can defeat with help along the way. In this case, previously, that it doesn't appear as though they created demons to do the bad thing. They created gods that were doing bad. But you see what is there. Is it the gods? Is it the demons that are the problem? Or is it the bad that they produce? Is it the skeletons in our closet, the demons that possess us, the weeds that are in our garden? All of those analogous terms are for something that is derogatory in this place. And what do we have here? A bunch of noisy, out-of-control gods in the chamber where the gods hang out. It's the same thing. And this should go without saying, but I want to kind of identify what those bad gods are. We should know, but they are the things that we carry that bring us off course, that are everything, anything. Anger, hatred, shame, hurt. I was raped, molested, beaten, told what a worthless piece of crap I was over and over again. Beaten, whipped, suffer. You come from some place in life where those are the tools you're given. Those are the gods that are acting out, that act out in many ways. Alcoholism, drugs, self-abuse. These are our demons. They have power over you, and they are acting out. And in this case, we're seeing Tiamat is realizing that in the place where the gods hang out, it's noisy and raucous, and she is unsettled. The mind, imagine your mind just being frazzled and you can't get settled. This is that point right there. We can tie right into here. We are Tiamat with an unsettled mind because the gods that are in charge of our past are acting out now. Bingo. Right here, we're hooked to this story. This is a point we can come back to, and we'll build off of it. But right here, if you're interpreting and it's like, oh, this is crazy, I can't get it, you can come back to this point and start again. We know right here where this is. And it'll continue to unfold that way, I'm going to suggest. So those gods, that's fine. Those are our bad characteristics that are in charge until we take over. Tiamat is that part of us that's like, oh, yeah, what the hell? This is what you gave me. That's what you gave me to work with. She's not saying that, but that is what happened, is they created together. How the lineage happens, and I'm not sure. Here we are at this point, though, and from here we're going to go heal. So let's take it to the next step. And she was bothered by all of their activity within the gods' hangout. There was nothing Apsu could do to mitigate their carousing, but there was nothing Tiamat would say to quiet them down. And no matter how troublesome their conduct became to her, regardless of how rowdy things were, she just put up with it. This kept up until divine Apsu, the source of the mighty gods, summoned to him and spoke to his officer Mumu, saying, "Hear me, Mumu, my trusted officer who I can rely upon. Come with me, and together we will go speak with Tiamat." Thus they went together and seated themselves before Tiamat, and they conversed with her about their children, the gods. Apsu raised his voice to be heard, speaking heartily to Tiamat. "I have been very troubled by the manner of their conduct, so that I cannot relax during the day nor sleep well at night. Therefore I shall bring it to a halt and get rid of them all. Then silence shall reign, and thus we might get some sleep." But as soon as Tiamat heard his words, she became incensed. Overcome with ire, she screamed intensely at her husband. But then she soothed the fury that raged within her breast. Okay, since we're hooked into this story, then we can go back and take a look at these in better detail. We just covered that the idea that these gods that are like out of control, taking over, they're running and she can't settle down or anything like that. It was just rowdy and she put up with it. Then this is going to be where we got to in life before we wake up. But we're getting close to the point. There's a part of us that is not awakened, and that is this right here. Now we're going to start bringing in parts of us that need to wake up. But before we get there, you have Tiamat then, and the drive kept up until Apsu, the source of the mighty gods. So our conscious is Apsu. We are the source of the mighty gods. We and Tiamat. That's the conscious, that is the subconscious. In the beginning, it looked like maybe. Yeah, I see it solid now. That's the conscious and the subconscious creating offspring that they're calling gods that are bad gods. Or raucous. Maybe not bad, just so troublesome your mind doesn't settle down. It could be anything, whatever it is that keeps us from inner peace. They're going to get to that in this as well. There's an analog for that called Babylon. So we see Apsu, the source of the mighty gods, that's us. Now we're coming back and we're speaking to an officer, Mumu, so we're going to have to pick up something else. We are now starting to interface with something else. We're not talking to our subconscious. Okay. So Apsu is our higher self. Mumu may be emerging as our consciousness. I don't know. We'll see what happens as we go along. Hear me, Mumu, my trusted officer, who I can rely upon. Come with me, and together we will go speak with Tiamat. So they're going to go interface with the subconscious. We are going to go start dealing with ourselves and saying, hey, we've got to change our lives. So we go together and seat before Tiamat, converse about the children of the gods. But what we're seeing here is that, well, first of all, Apsu is very specifically saying he doesn't sleep well at night or relax during the day. What happens to our heads when it gets like that and they won't shut down? The gods are in charge. That's it. We can't sleep at night. We can't relax during the day. We want to bring it to a halt and get rid of them all. When the silence is there, we'll get some sleep. We want silence in our minds. But Tiamat, the subconscious, at this point, is not prepared to go. Overcome with ire, she screams intensely at her husband. So we're seeing the starting of, we need to go and start changing our life, but it's not working. It's going to be problematic to start with. Can you see that beginning to emerge here? If we play it out inside, if we're bringing this in and making that transition, you're there. In the actual hero's journey template that was identified by Joseph Campbell, one of the first couple of steps, second or third step in there, is denial of the call. You get called and then you deny the call. And that is something that I believe we're seeing here, the precursor to that idea right here, that I want to make changes. I need to. But at first, it doesn't work. Things don't function. We'll see that happen in other places as well. Even Moses himself, when he was called, he's like, I can't speak right. So there's the denial of things happening. And that's what this kind of looks like, this element right here. There is also, like in Greek myth, there's a inability to leave the past behind, a struggle in the beginning to leave the past behind. And when I get there, we'll see that happen. This is that element. This is the beginning of the path, and it's difficult. Okay, moving along again. Remember the last line there on the last page was, then she soothed the fury that raged within her breast. And then it goes to the next page. Could we permit our own offspring to be thus eradicated? So she's asking, Tiamat is asking Apsu, yeah, are you serious? Can we permit what we gave birth to be eradicated? Despite their troublesome ways, we ought to put up with it. Then the officer Mumu provided his own answer to Apsu, but he spoke at odds with the advice of his mother, the earth. So pay attention to that. Mumu is also offspring of something here, the earth. Then we see in the next line, Mumu calls him father. Who do we call father? We call our higher self father when we're on the path, if we're using religious material to do so. The higher being, the higher God, the something or other. So yeah, Mumu is looking more and more like that is our consciousness that is needing to go in and interact and is being coached by, well, we'll keep going. Father, you ought to put an end to their annoying behavior. that one might relax during the day and sleep well at night. Apsu was in full agreement with what he said, and satisfied with thoughts of devising a vile plan for his sons the gods, his officer Mumu put his arms around him, hugging him, and fell down at his knees and enthusiastically kissed him. For parts of the interpretation, I'm going to pull back a little bit now. Everybody on board with what's happening? These are playing out inside, that they're analogs. We should be able to jump ahead a little bit quicker now. So, in a nutshell, even though we might not have all of the component parts identified, what we know is that we started out in life, we didn't have all these issues. But as we grew and developed, the conscious and the subconscious mind, having life experiences, makes the decision about whether or not that's good or bad. I hate it, I love it. That gets stored away in the brain. And during that process, this is creating the part of us that's going to be acting out. This is our early selves when we're not aware. You're living life and you're like, there's a part of you that's angry, mad, shut up, you don't know what I've been through. You have no idea the hurt that I've been through. I am justified in what I am doing. We start out that way. And then later you think to yourself, oh my God, I've got to get out of this. This is where I came from. This is what everybody's like out here. I don't want to be this way. I don't want to be like others. You begin to want to leave. But here is what is happening. We now want to interface with ourselves. Our conscious looks at our life and we go, I got to make changes, but we're stuck. We're in a place that's bad. We don't know what to do. We're at a point right here where our conscious, though, has made the transition, or our higher self is saying, we got to make changes. This is too crazy. We need to go in. And there's a part of us, Mumu, that is a conscious part of us at that time. This is the person that is this is the frustrated person that's like, my God, why do I do that? Please, let's do something. I don't know what to do. This is the conscious that doesn't know what to do. The higher self comes in and says, we need to go make some healing. We need to go inside. You've made some decisions unaware and put things away. We need to go back and find those things and rethink the way they are so that they cease to exist under their terms, is what's going to be happening here. That is where we are in the story right now. We were created. You see how it's the guru. You see other things in here. There's still a being that hasn't emerged yet. We saw Tiamat mad and screaming, and then, to the point that, it hurts her, and then she reasons it out. We see this reasoning process going on. We see confusion in the story with turning inward and healing. Okay, let's pick up where we left off here. Apsu was in full agreement with what he said and satisfied with thoughts of devising a vile plan for his sons the gods. His officer Mumu put his arms around him, hugging him, and fell down on his knees and enthusiastically kissed him. That's where we left off. What happens next, though? Yet what they planned was conveyed to their sons, the gods, for they heard everything and were troubled, pacing about. They all grew quite quiet and sat around without speaking, until the gods, with the gift for wisdom and understanding, Ea, the god who is insightful, recognized their intentions. And he formulated a solution for it all, planning it out well. He concocted it with superlative skill. His spell was perfect, for when he chanted it, he calmed the turbulent waters, and abounding sleep overcame Apsu. He became pacified. He caused him to enter a deep sleep, seeped in tranquility, while his officer Mumu, his advisor, was left in a trance. Then Ea removed his belt and took his crown from his head, and took his mantle of brilliance and dressed himself in it. And he forced Apsu down under his feet and crushed him. Okay, this is another place where we can really tie ourselves to the story. We can pin this part right here to a part of our life. And I'm sure many of you recognize it already. Where Ea comes from, we're going to keep working at these. They're adding in bits and pieces, so let's not get caught up in that. What we see, though, is that Ea is a god who is insightful, recognize their intentions. So here is a part of a god. Remember, the gods are something not okay. They realize that they're going to be dealt with by Mumu and Apsu. Apsu, remember, is our higher self. Mumu is the individual that is our whatever it is at that point in time that our higher self says, let's go take care of this. But what happens? Ea removed his belt and took his crown from his head. He's talking about Apsu. So Apsu is supposed to be the king, the one in charge. However, Ea takes his belt and his crown, took the mantle of brilliance, dressed himself in it, took over, took charge of everything, and forced Apsu down under his feet, crushed him, made Mumu go to sleep. This is our early self that becomes so strong and so clever and so whatever that it completely shuts down our higher being. We don't even know it's there. We don't have the capacity to see what we're doing. We're living our life blind, not awake yet. And that is what this is showing right here. We see this spot. We can pin this to our psyche right here. That is our Ea is our self before we're awake, or part of it. It's building that way. This is going to continue to build. It's going to add more details. It's a rich story, but it's not going to add a lot of difference in what we're doing. It's going to be repetitive. This is a small teaching contained in a large story in a culture that had storytelling as their media. Okay, continuing with Tablet 1. And bound Mumu, lying him down over him crosswise. Then he established his own residence on top of the Apsu. And he then took Mumu, holding him by a nose leash. And after he had subdued and then killed all of his foes, then Ea raised a declaration of victory over his adversaries. Then he could rest easy within his own personal chambers. And these he named Apsu, and established temples there, making it his home. Ea lived in luxury with his wife Damkina, there within the house of fate, there in the hall of purpose. Mysterious and beautiful, huh? This is, God, sometimes I get chills reading this stuff because you can link to it. I don't know. All right, so here we just have a very colorful and beautiful way of finishing that off where your previous self is in charge. It's established itself. It has absolutely shut down your higher being, and your consciousness, Mumu, nose leash, you're along for the ride. The gods are in charge. They're going to lead you around. Those gods are our unresolved issues from early in life, and we are not ready to face them. We're not looking at them yet. Then they create their temple, their own personal chambers. This is a place where we live that we're going to have to clean out later, but right now there it is. And we live in luxury there in the house of fate. Remembering that place is analogous. It's a state of mind. It is not really a physical location. It is a mental location, a state of existence. The house of fate. They're in the hall of purpose. We are living fate. And purpose is a part of cause and effect. I read living with fate and purpose here as you're not in charge. Whatever is in you is what is in charge. That's what's got Mumu in a nose ring. Now, Tablet 1 is split into two parts, and we just covered the first part. And remember, I want to reiterate that when we become the individual that says, I'm at wit's end, I want to go find out what's up, the material, if you learn how to turn it inward, holds the steps. It holds the pathway. And there's one technique to uncode them all, but the density of it, you can see if you've watched other videos, it's like, oh, it's the same thing over and over again. There's just more and more layers of it. Learning to read a little bit of it will help you read all of it. I get off subject a little bit sometimes like that. I stray a little bit, but I don't want to read these to people. I want people to read them to me. I want to know that this is right. Okay, so there's a lot of component parts that we don't have successfully identified. There's a lot of names along the way. So-and-so came from so-and-so, came from so-and-so. And this to me seems to be like as we're growing in life, one thing leads to another that you can, you start out in infancy, you're one kind of a person. You grow up and you pass who and what you are onto an older part of you, a teenage version or something, and then an adult version eventually. That we don't remain the same person throughout life, that we're constantly changing. And that as we're changing and making decisions about well, I got to change this. I need to interact with that. They're naming all of the little bits and pieces. This part that has to interact with that, we'll give them both names, is what they're doing. They're just constructing it all up that way. And so there's a lot of parts in there that might be superfluous, or that you realize I don't need to know what that is. I don't need to have that detail. I don't need to know what all of those gods are, what they represent. Oh, this one represents alcohol. This one represents, whatever. You only have to have one thing there that's anything that is derogatory. The story is built bigger than it needs to be. When we extract what's in there, it's a very simple thing built into a huge carrier, again, for a population that passes it along like this. So we have become our first selves. We see that. And now what we're going to do here is begin developing the characteristics and what is necessary to do combat with it. So here's where we started. This is what we need to do to resolve it. That is another layer in the material. It's sequencing from start to finish in big blocks and little blocks. Yeah. So I'm going to change the way I'm reading this. I'm going to read the next chunk start to finish. And what I'm going to invite people to do is to place themselves in the story, or to place the story inside of their psyche with those ideas in mind, that there's a lot of rich, superfluous details. There's things that happening where we're going to be creating a higher self that has enhanced capacity. I'll read it through once, then we'll come back and talk over the high points of it. And as I read it through, though, try to play it out in your psyche. Then the Lord came, who among all was the most judicious. There within the watery Apsu did Marduk take his shape. Within the unsullied waters of the Apsu was Marduk born. From his father Ea, his mother Damkina gave birth to him. He was suckled on the milk of the goddess's own breasts, and she who breastfed him embodied him with excellence, so that he had a lofty stature. The look of his eyes was intense, mature from the very first, and mighty even at a young age. When his grandfather Anu looked upon him, he was glad. His face shone greatly, his heart was exceedingly pleased. So perfect that his head was twice as lofty as any other god. Rising high above them, he was the better by every measure. Both his arms and legs were well formed beyond comparison, so that it could not be fathomed, almost incomprehensible. Moreover, he possessed 4 ears to hear and 4 eyes to see, and red flames leapt forth whenever he opened his mouth. His 4 ears were also considerable, of voluminous size, as were his eyes, which were capable of perceiving anything. Being unsurpassed among the gods, of exceptional build, having limbs which were mighty and a body terrifically tall. Then Anu cried, "Mariutu, my son, you are king of the gods." Dressed in a shining robe fit for 10 gods, rising beyond him, there were 5 almighty beams which surmounted his head, and Anu invented the 4 winds and then fashioned them. These he set in Marduk's hand, saying, "Free them, my son." Then he formed dust and caused the tornado to bear it away. Then he invented the tidal swell, which aggravated Tiamat, and Tiamat was agitated and unsettled both day and night. So with vile thoughts on their minds, they spoke to Tiamat, because at the time that they killed your husband Apsu, and you failed to stand by his side, but rather sat by silently. Thus did Anu invent the 4 strong winds and tidal swell, so as to intentionally agitate you, so that we have no peace. Did you not hold your husband Apsu within your heart, and likewise the officer Mumu, who was also captured? It's not surprising you're forsaken. Are you not a mother? You are unsettled both day and night, but look at our plight. Are we not distressed? Have a heart. Do you not care for us? Look, we lack strength in our limbs, and our eyes are hollow. Free us from this distressing burden that we might get sleep. Raise the war cry, make them pay for what they have done. Destroy this enemy, eradicate him entirely from off the earth. Tiamat listened to what they said, and she agreed with them. Yes, I think that we ought to do just as you have suggested. The gods who dwell within the Apsu will suffer great misery, for they choose to do evil to those gods that gave them birth. And they gathered about and stood in proximity to Tiamat. They were brutal and planned endlessly both day and night, grumbling and fuming, all done in the cause of making war. They called together a council of war to consider battle plans. Lady Hubert, who made all, produced an unfailing weapon. She brought big snakes with piercing teeth and vicious fangs. Their bodies she had infused with poison rather than blood. And she caused these raging dragons to emit deadly beams, and to wear mantles of brilliance so that they were like gods. Then the Lady Huber raised her voice, verbalizing the curse. Anyone who gazes at them will be stricken down with horror. They will always raise up their bodies and never back down. Then Tiamat enlisted a horned snake, a Mashusu dragon, a Lamu hero, an Ugulu devil, a mad dog, and scorpion man. Brutal Umu devils, a half-man, half-fish, a half-man, half-bull, carrying ruthless weaponry and who reveal no fear in battle. Her commands were so portentous that none could be ignored, and in addition to these, she recruited 11 more likewise. And above all her children of the gods who had assembled, she conferred upon Kingu the chief rank amongst them all, bestowing the generalship of her army and rule of the Congress, to hold aloft the spear to signify battle, to gather the warriors. She had given him high command of the entire combat force, and placed him to be seated upon the throne of rule, saying, I have conjured a spell in your name, making you foremost among the gods of Congress. You now rule all of the gods. You will reign supreme, for further, you will be my soulmate. Your orders shall not be disregarded among the Anuki. She conveyed to him the tablet of fate, clasping it at his chest. What you say will not be altered, and you will speak the law. So after Kingu had received his rank, been given Anu power, and had pronounced the fates of his sons, the gods, he said, What comes from out of your lips would obliterate flames. Your potent poison would serve to incapacitate the mighty. End of Tablet 1. I think reading stuff like that can just be very foreign, can't it? So let's start hammering just the highlights a little bit. I'll go back to the first one right there. The Lord came who was among the most judicious. Father Ea suckled. What we basically have right here is the emergence of Marduk. I won't go through all the details, and there's probably detail in here that just keep going and going and going. Overview. Let's just take the big pieces and parts here. Right here, yeah, we are breastfed, embodied him with excellence, lofty stature, look in his eyes. So we're seeing the emergence of a special individual. And as that moves on, his grandfather looked upon him. So this is just showing lineage. We don't care. Let's just get right to what he is. Rising high above him, he was better by other measure. His body, he's strong. So much so that it's incomprehensible, physical. But we're talking about a spiritual and inner strength that I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. Get out of my way. That kind of strength. This is the kind of power we have. So that it could not be fathomed, almost incomprehensible. Moreover, he possessed 4 ears to hear and 4 eyes to see. This is your feelers, your sensors. They're seeing back then that there's somebody that has a greater capacity, a larger spatial awareness that can see things in a larger scope than the average people. And here they're describing it. Red flames forth whenever open their mouth. Yeah, take no crap. 4 ears, voluminous size, you can hear, perceive. This is identifying, few are called, not many people. Upright, upstanding. Being unsurpassed among the other gods, so this is a part of us that is going to be stronger than other parts of us. Then Anu cried, Mariutu, my son, you are king of the gods. Dressed in the robes, he's in charge. Okay, what's happening here now is we get the 5... There were 5 almighty beams which surmounted his head. I'm going to suggest that this is probably the first place of 5 something other. Remember the 5 trees in paradise, 5 beams in his head, 5 trees in paradise. They're the same thing. Gnostics, here's where that's what originates. That's where the Gnostics get 5 trees in paradise from, right here. And Anu invented the 4 winds and then fashioned them. What we're having happen right here, free them, my son. Then he formed the dust and caused the tornado to bear it away. We're creating whirlwinds. We're creating the way to stir things up. He invented a tidal swell, which aggravated Tiamat. A tidal swell. Ooh, what's that? That sounds like the first beginnings of a flood myth, perhaps. And Tiamat was agitated and unsettled both day and night. What I get right here is we are at a point in time in life where we're fighting with ourselves and we're struggling. It's like, son of a... Yeah, and that is what is happening at this part. So with vile thoughts on their minds, they spoke to Tiamat. This is the gods that are inside of you that are saying, hey, when they killed your husband Apsu, when they killed off that part of you that was good and kind and put something else in charge, it didn't say that. You failed to stand by his side and fell silent. So now they're doing all of this stuff that is trying to stop us. You've captured all of them. You've captured Mumu. You've captured the parts. Yeah, I think it's easier just for me to be quiet and you to see it. That this is the gods, the past self, simply complaining. It's difficult to leave the past. It is difficult to leave the past. And right here we see the struggle where the past is begging to be left in place. Don't, instead of leaving the past behind, here's the past asking to be left in place. See how you can either push or pull the story, either way. But let's keep putting a face to what these are. These are our convictions, our habits, our beliefs, our fears, our shame. Those are the things. They're not really asking to survive. They're hiding and they're telling you, get lost. We're the ones that have to deal with that. That is what we are interacting with right here. Free us from this distressing burden that we might get sleep. Tiamat listened. She agreed with them, wipe them off the earth. So this is really the internal struggle we're having, saying, get rid of whatever is trying to come in here and stir things up. Get them out. Let us alone. Let us have our life. I don't want to struggle with changing. Grumbling and fuming all done, causing the making of war. We have this big internal struggle going on. They called together a council of war to consider battle plans. And now what is happening, Lady Huber, I don't know where that person comes from, verbalizing the curse, but is creating creatures that are demons that are going to be playing out of you. They are the, whatever these are, something from their culture. I don't know, their boogeyman, whatever stories they have. And there are things in their culture that I think that emerge from pictures and whatnot, that these are something that is meaningful to them. But to us, I think we look at them as analogs, not as real things, but as things that are being created from the inside as stuff that act out, that create the trouble. This is when we act out, and we act out in very ugly ways that creates trouble for us, whether we're yelling or doing something, carrying ruthless weaponry, no fear in battle. Yeah, this is so violent inside that when you act out, it's like, I don't even care. I don't care. It's coming out. Later, you might go, oh my God, why did I do that? But at the time it comes out, there's something else happening. There's something else in charge. That God is in charge. Bestowing the generalship of her army and rule of the Congress, she is creating Kingu. Kingu is going to be, when I am myself not waking up yet and telling everybody, you're all wrong, I'm right. Nobody else can get this. When we're that dumb, that is who we are. That is Kingu right there. We will reign supreme, and we will be the soulmate of Tiamat, our subconscious, whatever is holding those in. That is, she's along for the ride. I don't know what the Anuki is. That, again, is going to be cultural from there. That appears elsewhere. As we move on, we're going to continue to see things. She conveyed to him the tablet of fate, clasping it at his chest. This is destiny. This is the rule. This is how things are going to happen and how they're going to unfold. We're going to see the tablet of fate appear in I would say the Philosopher's Stone, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the 10 Commandments. All of these are indicating that there is a set of rules somewhere, cosmic background somewhere that makes things work, and they're set in stone. They cannot be changed. However, right here, in this case, what they're using is that however things are going to work, whatever is going to emerge is in charge. We put our past in charge of that, is what this is saying. Yeah. What you say will not be altered, and you will speak the law. That person is in charge. Period. So after King, who had received his rank, been given Anu power, had pronounced the fates of his sons and gods, he said, what comes out of your lips would obliterate flames. Your potent poison would serve to incapacitate the mighty. Yeah, we're badasses. We're going to be rough people. We're not going to want to move along in life. Let's read this one more time and see what it sounds like second time through. Then the Lord came, who among all was the most judicious. There within the watery Apsu did Marduk take his shape. Within the unsullied waters of the Apsu was Marduk born. From his father Ea, his mother Damkina gave birth to him. He was suckled on the milk of the goddess's own breasts, and she who breastfed him embodied him with excellence, so that he had a lofty stature. The look of his eyes was intense, mature from the very first, and mighty even at a young age. When his grandfather Anu looked upon him, he was glad. His face shone greatly, his heart was exceedingly pleased. So perfect that his head was twice as lofty as any other god. Rising high above them, he was the better by every measure. Both his arms and legs were well formed beyond comparison, so that it could not be fathomed, almost incomprehensible. Moreover, he possessed 4 ears to hear and 4 eyes to see, and red flames leapt forth whenever he opened his mouth. His 4 ears were also considerable, of voluminous size, as were his eyes, which were capable of perceiving anything. Being unsurpassed among the gods, of exceptional build, having limbs which were mighty and a body terrifically tall. Then Anu cried, Mariutu, my son, you are king of the gods. Dressed in a shining robe fit for 10 gods, rising beyond him, there were 5 almighty beams which surmounted his head, and Anu invented the 4 winds and then fashioned them. These he set in Marduk's hand, saying, Free them, my son. Then he formed dust and caused the tornado to bear it away. Then he invented the tidal swell, which aggravated Tiamat, and Tiamat was agitated and unsettled both day and night. So with vile thoughts on their minds, they spoke to Tiamat, because at the time that they killed your husband Apsu, and you failed to stand by his side, but rather sat by silently. Thus did Anu invent the 4 strong winds and tidal swell, so as to intentionally agitate you, so that we have no peace. Did you not hold your husband Apsu within your heart, and likewise the officer Mumu, who was also captured? It's not surprising you're forsaken. Are you not a mother? You are unsettled both day and night, but look at our plight. Are we not distressed? Have a heart. Do you not care for us? Look, we lack strength in our limbs, and our eyes are hollow. Free us from this distressing burden that we might get sleep. Raise the war cry. Make them pay for what they have done. Destroy this enemy. Eradicate him entirely from off the earth. Tiamat listened to what they said, and she agreed with them. Yes, I think that we ought to do just as you have suggested. The gods who dwell within the Apsu will suffer great misery, for they choose to do evil to those gods that gave them birth. And they gathered about and stood in proximity to Tiamat. They were brutal and planned endlessly both day and night, grumbling and fuming, all done in the cause of making war. They called together a council of war to consider battle plans. Lady Hubert, who made all, produced an unfailing weapon. She brought big snakes with piercing teeth and vicious fangs. Their bodies she had infused with poison rather than blood. And she caused these raging dragons to emit deadly beams, and to wear mantles of brilliance so that they were like gods. Then the Lady Huber raised her voice, verbalizing the curse. Anyone who gazes at them will be stricken down with horror. They will always raise up their bodies and never back down. Then Tiamat enlisted a horned snake, a Mashusu dragon, a Lamu hero, an Ugulu devil, a mad dog, and scorpion man. Brutal Umu devils, a half-man, half-fish, a half-man, half-bull, carrying ruthless weaponry and who reveal no fear in battle. Her commands were so portentous that none could be ignored, and in addition to these, she recruited 11 more likewise. And above all her children of the gods who had assembled, she conferred upon Kingu the chief rank amongst them all, bestowing the generalship of her army and rule of the Congress, to hold aloft the spear to signify battle, to gather the warriors. She had given him high command of the entire combat force, and placed him to be seated upon the throne of rule, saying, I have conjured a spell in your name, making you foremost among the gods of Congress. You now rule all of the gods. You will reign supreme, for further, you will be my soulmate. Your orders shall not be disregarded among the Anuki. She conveyed to him the tablet of fate, clasping it at his chest. What you say will not be altered, and you will speak the law. So after Kingu had received his rank, been given Anu power, and had pronounced the fates of his sons, the gods, he said, What comes from out of your lips would obliterate flames. Your potent poison would serve to incapacitate the mighty. Okay, after all of that, did it sound different the second time through? Kind of go through it one time, talk about it, go through it again. We could talk about it again, go through it again. We keep unfolding it that way. Just gradually dissecting it, seeing what it is, and realizing it is a structure that is just hidden in verbiage, that is meant for the masses to carry and be entertained with as well. It's a simple lesson in a story that's very complicated, and I don't have it all unwrapped, but you can see the teaching template in there. All of the extraneous parts that are parts of the carrier, they're parts of the case. They're not part of the shell, they're part of the color, they're part of the flavor. When you look inside, the prettiness kind of goes away, but the healing begins. So what we had here, again, in the very first part, it was how we formed. There's structure that we'll have to go back and look at again. It'll continue to grow. I know I've said things wrong. I know that I don't have everything understood, but I know that tomorrow I will look at some things that I did today and go, I got a better idea. It keeps going that way. But I'll bring it into Tablet 2. I'll finish this one up for now. I wanted to go back and review the first part a little bit, but it's gone on pretty long here. So it's a process that I think will speed up as we move along. So, put questions, comments below. Ask me anything. I'm not certain where to go. I'm figuring this out as I go and trying to learn how to convey it as I go. And I want other people to see it and read it with me. So, anyway, I hope this was enjoyable. Love one another, and I'll see you on Tablet 2.